Hello guys. This is like the pre-show, I guess. I try to have it 5 minutes early, just so we can like figure it out how it's gonna go. Right now, I'm just trying to clean this up real quick. How are you guys doing? So we're gonna be discussing today how physics, or at least how the research sort of shows how physics itself just shows how everything is self-repeating, everything is iterative. So right now I'm just collecting my notes. We're gonna start with the standard model. We're gonna start with why I believe what I believe and why it's like an infinite loop. So we're gonna go over the entire loop of physics in like a minute. Just let me get my notes. This is like the pre-show, so ask any questions, I'll look at them. All right. How are you guys doing? We're almost set up completely. All right. Let's just begin. Okay, so what's going on right now is that I'm trying to explain how physics is an infinite loop, how life will always loop. Let's try to see what camera angle is good. Is this okay, or shall we try to fix it to this way? Let's try to fix it to this way. So I'll just try to grab my lamp because I don't have a stand. Grab my lamp and use this to balance that for now. All right. So I guess I'll just stand to the side. Let's move that. Let's not do this for now. So in the very basics of reality, there is the standard model. The standard model has just about a few particles. It has like 12 particles. But the point is that I realized that these rules over here of this like double binary of the up and the down, what happens here is that this just means that there's just a common set. So because you can describe things as it either is or it isn't within this spectrum, now you have an entire spectrum of consciousness. That's like a positive. This is like X. All right. And now you have this set. This which can go negative or positive. This is the set in a different direction, in a 90-degree direction. So if you ever want to know what it means to be in, like, what does it mean for two things to be 90 degrees to each other? What does it mean for two things, yeah, exactly, to be 90 degrees from each other in terms of physics, in terms of my life? How does this stuff apply to my life? So the weird thing is that these are like fundamental spaces of reality. So because I can fit information within this space of up and down, within like, it's like quantum mechanics. So in quantum mechanics, you have the ability to do linear algebra on vectors, on like unit forces, unit directions. So because we can do this to this vector space, and that vector space is also the set of like an infinite set, because these are like two infinite vector spaces, they both include infinity within themselves. So because this one is big and that one's just as big, like you can put a lot of information already. So this you can imagine as like X and Y. So X and Y can go on to infinity. That's what we can imagine this as. But now we have extra variables. Now we have like a Y and a Z. So now we can go Y into infinity and Z into infinity. But notice that these are components of those other two. So if you ever are wondering what is multivariable calculus, it's this. Multivariable calculus is just a 90-degree offset of information, where you still use the information of the higher set. That's what this means. So because you can use information 90 degrees to a set, this is the exact same equivalence of what's it called? A differential equation, where two functions are iterative on each other. So because now we understand how we can iterate information, you can iterate variables as well. Variables can be self-iterative off of each other. So for an XYZ axis, the most efficient way to write it would be using potentials and fields. And we can do that. So if you really want to have a really good video game, you need to know how to code in potentials and fields, because these calculations are direct. These are direct calculations of what happens there. You don't need to do any force vectors above. You don't need to do any force vectors on these larger ones. You only need to do operators or calculations on the difference between this point and that point. You're actually using Green's theorem. You're using these surface multivariable calculus rules that we already know. So because we can solve things like this, that gives me intuition for scalars. Scalars are consistent. They are infinite. So if we have an infinite scalar set, we can define all of reality. This is why, now let's go into the coding algorithm. Okay, so I'm writing a fundamental algorithm, and this algorithm will try to describe how this process from the damn particles actually codes your entire life around you. Your entire life is just these particles. What occultism is actually realizing how to binary reality, how to break apart information. I can see into consciousness space. I can see into any vector space of reality. So what I mean is I know how to decompose a set, both in linear rules from the same particles, X, Y, Z, this is inertia. From these rules, you can decompose all of reality. I can do that every time. So because you can imagine this one to be up, this one's anti-up, this one's down, and that's anti-down. So because we can code directions of reality into the same fundamental space of information, that's what quantum mechanics is decomposing the information of reality. So we have done that. We have successfully done that with the standard model. Because we've done this, we can now move on to coding reality itself. We can break apart the coding for language, for consciousness. Like I can understand anybody, where they're coming from, like their soul nature, like their soul, all this spiritual stuff is just decomposing the binaries of reality. That's what I've been trying to say. So, okay, so are you guys following along so far? Does it make sense? Just to keep up. So we're going to move from now. So because we see how to decompose what kind of spaces this gives us. So this gives us 2D and X. That gives us 2D and Y. And this gives us some component of spin. Notice the physics. If that was X variable and this is Y variable, this is like it's a cross product. That's what these vectors are. These are informational vectors that are cross products to these two. And these are like, these are weird. These are like the zero line of information, where it's both is and it isn't. So this is neutrality. This is the neutral space of reality. Neutral space is sort of like so I'm trying to give you the broad set. So then it's literally like the basis of mathematics. The basis of physics is supposed to be to explain how to use mathematics to chart reality. That's the purpose of physics. So I now tell you, the member, how to decompose reality. Let's just go through an example, because that's sort of like how it works. So we're going to go through the fundamental algorithm. This is how you can decompose anything using the particle theory. So let's kind of move this up so you can still see it over there. So there's a game called 7 Days to Die. And in order to code the game, how can spirituality be explained by this math? So it's sort of, we're going to touch that by trying to come up with an example of explaining how your life is just a game, technically. Like because you can code things around you like this, you can like, this is how reality works. This game, okay, let's just explain that code. Okay, so in 7 Days to Die, in order to try to create like a realistic space without having too much computations, too much calculations of like the zombies AI, you want to be able to detect the player's consciousness. You want to be able to like guess with like a fitness function where the player is going to be along the grid coordinates of the map. You want to know where the player is going to be. So we can use some predictive functions to chart where the player is traveling. You know, like, because people have like traveling. Okay, but that doesn't matter for now. As you encounter things in the world, you get bits of information. So suppose I see a zombie there, so I get a bit of information. I know that there's a zombie there. So because the player has tracked it as seeing the object, I can now mark this as red. This is now fair game. The player knows this exists. So because the player knows this exists, this is how you can like track consciousness. So the goal is if you can track the bits of information in a video game first, if you can understand how this works and how to like spot consciousness, then you'll understand how to spot consciousness in the real world. So you can, as any bit of change, so let's try to go now from the game to the real world. Okay, so let's keep describing things. Let's pretend this is the real world. So the player, let's try to guess the player's mind. That's what this is. You can binary, because your brain is a binary, your consciousness can only think in terms of binaries, in terms of bits. So now the player knows there is a zombie. So we have to put in a scalar value. So this is once again, this algorithm is the general algorithm for how you make this, how you make the super efficient chip. This chip works by using the vector spaces of reality. So because we can decompose using these variables, all of position space, all you need is like the triple set. The triple set of each of these major vectors of x, y, z, x, y, z, x, y, z, x, y, z, x, y, z in each of the common basis, r, theta, and phi. So that's what these matrices are. The matrices above are the computation or the binary bits of information that will be processed by that game master. You get me? This is how your brain actually like computes data, computes information. Your brain just does this efficiently, and it saves information by making it like packed. But this is a universal algorithm. This happens to everything. Everything goes through this like triple set, or this like sextuple set. And while I was going through my research, let's just see this thing. The mathematician Nate Velt, PhD now, because he was applying for his thesis, and his math from how just to set groups in terms of fundamental information space of math. The math that he has like quantified describes various cases and various situations of particle exchange. This is all equal charge. They repulse. They spread apart. He says all edges negative, the bound is very loose. That's pretty interesting. They repel. Here's another case. So what I'm going to do right now, so I have the algorithm. We have the general basis. We know it's the standard model. And what I did over the course of like my research, just by living life, I was trying to map the vector spaces of reality. That's what this does. So the vector spaces that like these information like agencies use to track you, your consciousness, I realized, well, what's the point of national surveillance? Like that's just a bummer, bro. Turns out, no, this is actually useful technology. We don't have to use this just for evil. We can use consciousness detection technology to calculate and integrate with the human brain. You get me? So that's what this is doing. We're realizing how everything is the same, is just code, is just the standard model, is just physics, can be calculated like this with potentials and surfaces and mass. Everything loops no matter what. And we can like start to see this. The distance of consciousness, of stars, like everything is like, so a transcendental number is an infinite number. It's an infinite series of summations. Gravity, like if you're ever wondering what the universal constants are, these are the literal like infinite calculation of an object as it travels through vector space. It does that every time. Now, how it flows and what rate it flows at is the weak force. It flows through time at a specific speed, at a specific rate. So the world of physics around you and time itself is time. Time is like this information flow. It's the fastest exchange of anything. So gravity is the fastest exchange of potential energy with no outside forces. It's just going through the universe at the fastest possible rate. For this field, it's traveling. That's gravity. Information is communication. Consciousness, intelligence is information. Your consciousness can be tracked easily, actually, and that's how TikTok works. Your consciousness can be binaried. You're not special. You are this algorithm. You think like this, and if you don't think like this, you're literally, technically the word is retarded, because you're traveling at a slower rate than the maximum possible efficiency of processing information. You are technically a retarded potential. That's a physics term. You are officially a retarded potential. Joking, but that is the term. So how this works is just like the game. I need to detect if the player recognizes this. Here's the algorithm for the brain. Here's how TikTok works. The algorithm for detecting consciousness is if I send stimuli to the corner of his consciousness, to the most incomprehensible thing that he could possibly comprehend, because this is the cone of consciousness. This is the cone of what you're willing to listen to. This is you, right now. You are currently traveling somewhere along this cone. And this middle line, relativity, is your central basis. This is normalcy. This is normalcy. How wide, how expansive compared to the set of all possible 2D infinity, how much of infinity you actually have within your mind is where your cone of consciousness. How much are you willing to listen to new ideas? This is where spirituality comes in. Because everything is just binary and everything is just like bits of information, the world around you is also bits of information. It's a world of information that you can comprehend at a specific rate. And that rate of comprehension is your world. That's your consciousness. If you can't comprehend faster than this, then you're going to have to stay in your middle line. And you travel through time. So because you couldn't calculate it fast enough, your cone is just moving past you. Your world line is moving past you. This is the connection of general relativity. So people are wondering, what is the difference between general relativity and quantum mechanics? Or at least why is there a difference in physics? Why can't we unify them? It's because what's actually happening is that relativity is the observer. You are traveling. You are just information, some bit units, some bits. Your body is just a collection of bits that are turned on right now. And as you travel through space, different bits turn on. You get me? You're moving. You're a wave function. You are a wave function. Quantum mechanics is just the bits of information of the world around you. Quantum mechanics just makes things in terms of math. So to make thing a quantum system, you just have to say it isn't or it is. So we don't have an up, or we do have an up. So I use the quantum mechanics once again to start thinking in terms of code, to start realizing how we can couple consciousness and random noise to these bits. So information travels, everything travels through the physical laws. So this was my notes on relativity. So once again, it's the light cone, it's the consciousness, but now this is the reaction cone. So if you wanted to, do something, so now this is like the Hunter reactor cone or something like that. We're trying to move away from the consciousness. That's the better one. So we can both this is your perception cone. So let me try to remember the notes. So what we're going to do right now. Okay. I don't like that perspective. It was what I was working through at the time. So let's just keep talking about spaces of consciousness with the code, with the matrices. All right, I just need questions now because I feel like I basically explained the math part. So now let's talk about we got to finish the relativity. So you are traveling through the potential of time at some rate. You can quantify every system in the world with multi-axes. This is if you're trying to quantify like chains through space, you need to use this system. For any equation, for every equation, for any motion through a three-dimensional space, if you cannot code your system to do this in terms of these coordinate systems, you're going to have an inefficient algorithm. You're going to take more computations than you need. And that's what we need to do. We need to start thinking about how to code in terms of this. And that's what my research is. So let's go back to bits for now. So we can start bidding information. So we know the player saw the zombie because he recognized it, because we had some millisecond reaction time, like because we had some delay. We know the player saw this. He freaked out. Maybe if his angle returns to this object, we can confirm further. Like, you get me? This is a wave function. So you start realizing how you code information as wave functions. Perception. So if I see the zombie for this millisecond amount of time, apply some operator function to increase like as like some value that is equal to like we call awareness, you know? This is like the player attention. Let's call it attention. And this value increases up to a maximum of 1. So, and it decays at a certain rate. Some alpha, actually let's call it beta because that's like decaying, you know? That's how you sort of like do resistive rates. Your attention decays at some rate as if the player is no longer looking at the object. And we can safely say that the player after this is like a test for constant. You can test for this stuff. So through your beta trials of your video game, you need to figure out what do I need to keep loaded and why. You need to do attention variable analysis. You have to do this if you want to like have efficient consciousness. If you have attention on things that are like of survival, of things that are like danger, like, you get me? You are taking up your own brain's computation space. So this is how reality works. This game master thing that some guy came up with just to try to sort of save some information in his game about zombies, I realized that thing, like, he actually came up with a perfect method to create the next generation of video games that are procedurally generated and are fun as hell. So the technology of physics that can be used to track your consciousness, that can be used to do TikTok, that can be used to do national surveillance, doesn't have to be for evil. We don't have to just use this to just steal your information. We don't have to use this to say, like, I'm looking at the quantum mechanics that I know because you pressed an A, the encryption you get me? Like, there's ways to steal information no matter what. Who cares? You know? But the physics is basically saying, because the world around you can be coded into a video game, and you can see how it's coded, you can see how because we can track the brain in video games, we can track the brain in real life. That's how TikTok and AI algorithms, like, you know, to figure out more about you work. You are just a collection of bits to the elite, to everyone, to anybody that who has the technology. You're just a bunch of bits that are turned on, and they think that because you have a certain amount of bits, like, okay, now it gets into crazy. Now let's talk about the implications of personality physics. So now we know how to track attention. We know it's done with this algorithm most efficiently. Let's see how this works, at least how this affects you. So we can now trigger this is just to make efficient memory. My memory code is not yet done, but you can recursively code anything because the standard model repeats. You can recursively code the standard model within itself. So that's what's crazy about this. This is not only a computation algorithm, this is a memory algorithm. Reality works this way. DNA works this way. You get me? This is 4 different vector spaces. These are technically like the equivalent terms of, like, you get me, your UDGA or something. I don't know them. But you get me, there's 4 of them. So there's 4 vector spaces here. Everything is coded within itself. Complete with errors. It's crazy. It's beautiful. Consciousness is just like a Fourier series. Like, you are just a set of Fourier series. Like, suppose, okay, let's actually make a clean. Let's make a clean one so you can really understand the danger of this, about how they're trying to categorize people as extremists. So we have some normal line. This is like the normal line of society. This is how it works, of their surveillance stuff. You get me? It just makes, this is how I would do it. You get me? I have some like normal line that I consider society. You know, if society has its attention too much on what I think is like, the same thought patterns or the same bit patterns of what I consider an enemy or an extremist, you get me? You can see whoever's bit patterns partially line up. You get me? Your consciousness is a set of bits, a set of attention. This is what companies are trading and buying with services like TikTok. This is what I would do. This is what I would love to do if I knew how to code. You get me? If I was a dictator and I didn't know how to do this stuff, but I knew it was possible. You get me? It's not that hard. This isn't hard. I want that to be known. The world around us is now getting difficult. It's getting it's too much it's too easy to manipulate and to use the wrong way. So now we're just gonna open up to questions and anything. But yeah, that's how everything works. You're just this. This is what you are to to the elites. This is what you are to like AI developers. This is what you are, because it is you. But they think, oh no, that can't actually be us. You know, that's just attention. But the world around us is coded the same damn way. You get me? Your world around you can be described as this Fourier function of normalcy. You know, what around you are the bits of the world around you? You know, what is normal? What is like, you get me? Consciousness is this. This is equal to that. So it's freaky when you start to see the patterns. It's the same thing. It has the same path. It goes through it loops. Okay, any questions? We're gonna have it up to questions for like the last 4 minutes. I'll just post this on the YouTube as well. Anybody? We'll just wait, ask any questions, because it's supposed to be for 30 minutes, so I'll give you guys the office hour time. You can use this if you want, so I'll just have that. It's like a visual reference. What is that graph I drew? This one? This is consciousness. Concept of time here. Oh, time flows at this rate. Time flows at the rate of weak particles like splitting apart within each other. So if I bring my like hand, so like, you know, like the electrical exchange that they say like is like repulsion. Electric repulsion is a specific swap of W my like I have it in my notes, but it's an exchange of quarks, you know? So whenever they say like the electric potential is exchanged with an electron, it is an electron, but it's how I have an electron coded. Electrons are not fundamental particles. They're just owed energy sets of a W minus particle. That's why they also have the particle wave duality. They're not a single particle. They're literally 2. So it makes sense why it can do that self-interference. So yeah, That's what time is. So time is just the acceleration, the linear acceleration of this happening every millisecond of every day, millisecond of everything. Time is an observation in the head. Anything you use to measure is an observation. This entire video is basically saying how consciousness / observation does exist within physics. It exists, and it's actually the state of awareness / the state of bits in a game. You know, observations are just bits. They're just checked bits. You get me? That's what physics is. So you are just a computer, a brain, a matrix that has bits turned on that says, oh yeah, that's what that is. And your brain tries to like recursively like narrow information. You get me? It narrows information that it needs to be processing in that moment. Have you watched Philip Goff? I don't know. We'll still have questions open for another minute. Different for everyone unless we focus on the same thing. I guess so, yeah, but you're right, but observation will always occur. It's pretty cool. So, like, life will never end. Like, there will always be consciousness because consciousness exists is just information. It's just a wave. It's a bit information. So consciousness can be coded physically. It can actually be a physical wave. It could be a scalar. Like, it doesn't matter. Imaginary scalar written down, a number, a bit on a hard drive. It's all the same. Like, it doesn't matter if I represent a brain in terms of like water on like an aqueduct on a plant. Everything is both real and not real. Is both just a number in some other plane of existence. Yes, consciousness is that. Like, we have the ability to see infinity now. Infinity has always been next to us this whole time, and we never knew it. The world around us, like spirituality, society, is just bits, and you can figure out those bits. It's not hard. I've been doing it this whole time, and I'll start like probably releasing bit value maps, and I want that to be like the public thing. We're gonna start just writing bit values for consciousness. Like, oh, here's where we are. You know, like these like this is society. Like, we have these bits turned on, and we can choose to flow in anywhere we want. Like, you get me? Consciousness is fluid. It doesn't have to ever be linear. If you think in linear time, if you think in linear consciousness, that means you cannot turn. That means in terms of like the hunter thing, like if you think in linear time, you only travel in one direction. You get me? And you travel in the straight direction. If you think in complex time, if you think in like, okay, I'm going to try to trick this guy, you veer off at an angle. So if I don't understand where your consciousness is, and I try to predict as you're just going forward, this is literally hunter-prey dynamic. So now this guy has survived, and he can choose to now live his life linearly, or he has to continue living within the edges of society. You get me? This is sort of like relativity in a way. You could like this is how hunter as well as like criminal algorithms can detect people. If you are on the edge of society, you get me, it takes work. However, if you now travel stable, you're now like you're within that region. But if you ever want to return to the normal line, you have to come back to the normal line. You get me? It's pretty beautiful. And we're over time. But if there's any last questions, we're going to close it and then post it on the YouTube. All right, guys. Bye.